The investor switched to Turkish to hide his threat. The quiet waitress translated calmly and stopped him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. On a chilly autumn evening in a cozy Manhattan cafe, the atmosphere was filled with the hum of quiet conversations and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The regular patrons sipped their lattes, unaware of the strange encounter that was about to unfold. At one of the corner tables, a wealthy investor named Richard Larson sat alone, his posture stiff and his eyes glued to the screen of his expensive smartphone. Dressed in an impeccable dark suit, Richard seemed to exude an air of superiority. He had been waiting for his dinner guest, but his patience was running thin. The waiter had yet to bring him his wine, and he could feel the minutes slipping away. "This is ridiculous," Richard muttered under his breath, barely glancing up as he tapped away on his phone. The room buzzed around him, but he was entirely disconnected from the life that swirled outside his bubble. He was used to things going his way, to having the power to move mountains, to control people. His wealth and influence were enough to bend any situation to his will. But tonight, there was something about this dinner meeting that made him uneasy. He was a man who had built an empire, yet here he was, nervously checking the time. As the door of the cafe chimed, a figure stepped in, cutting through the cold air. It was a young woman, dressed in the standard black and white uniform of a waitress. She glanced at the crowd, her eyes scanning the room before settling on Richard. Her name was Elena. A shy, quiet soul, she had been working here for only a few months. Little did she know, tonight she would be the one to alter the course of this encounter. Richard barely looked up as she approached, her presence hardly registering in his mind. "Good evening, sir," Elena said, her voice soft but steady. She placed the glass of water in front of him, but her hands trembled ever so slightly, a telltale sign of her nerves. Richard finally raised his eyes, meeting hers for the first time. "I'm waiting for someone," he said curtly, clearly dismissing her with just a glance. Elena nodded and turned to leave, but just before she did, she overheard a snippet of his conversation with the man on the other end of the phone. Richard was speaking in a language she hadn't expected, Turkish. She knew just enough of the language from her time studying abroad, and what she heard next sent a chill down her spine. The words were laced with thinly veiled threats. "If you don't cooperate, your business will be destroyed. Consider this a warning," Richard had said, his tone icy and calm. Elena froze in place. Her heart raced, and in that moment, she knew she couldn't just ignore what she had overheard. She had to do something. Elena took a deep breath, steadied her nerves, and with a small, calculated step forward, she turned back to Richard. "Sir, if I may," she began, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "It seems there was a misunderstanding. The message you are trying to convey has been misinterpreted." Richard blinked, his brow furrowing in confusion. He had expected the waitress to go on with her usual routine, not interrupt him. "What are you talking about?" he asked, the annoyance in his voice clear. Elena smiled faintly. "You mentioned something about threats to a business," she said calmly. "But I believe the translation wasn't quite right. Let me help you with that." Richard's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time that evening, he truly noticed her. He was momentarily stunned. You speak Turkish?" he asked, his voice low. Elena nodded, still calm. "Yes, I do. I just thought I'd offer my help. You see, what you said? It sounded like a serious threat, but I believe the words you used were a little too harsh for what you intended." Richard sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He hadn't expected this. A waitress, in the middle of a quiet cafe, not only understood his language but had the courage to speak out. Elena continued, her voice unwavering. "If you were trying to keep your words hidden, you should know, sir, that speaking in a foreign language might not be as effective as you think, especially when someone like me is listening." Richard's expression darkened, but there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. He had underestimated her, and now, in front of the other patrons, he was caught. He had no choice but to listen. What followed was a tense silence, but Elena's calm demeanor made it clear she wasn't backing down. She had turned the tables, and Richard, the man who controlled billions, was now the one who felt trapped. After Elena's calm intervention, Richard sat back in his chair, momentarily stunned. He had been caught off guard, his mind racing. The threat he had tried to hide in a foreign language was now out in the open, and the woman who had exposed him was just a waitress. He had always prided himself on his ability to control situations, to outsmart people, and yet, this woman, with her quiet demeanor, had turned the tables on him in a matter of seconds. The cafe, once filled with the hum of soft chatter, now felt eerily silent, as if the entire room was waiting for him to react. Elena stood there, calm and composed, as though this was just another part of her routine. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't reacted with panic, but there was something in her steady gaze that told Richard she was not intimidated by him. He knew he had underestimated her, but now, he was intrigued. "You're brave," he finally said, his voice low but tinged with respect. Elena didn't flinch. "I'm not here to challenge you, sir. I'm just here to do my job." Richard narrowed his eyes, not quite sure how to proceed. He had expected to be the one in control, but somehow, the dynamic had shifted. He wasn't sure what to make of this woman, but one thing was certain, she had caught his attention. "You really understand Turkish, don't you?" he asked, his tone softening slightly. "I do," Elena replied, her voice steady. "And I understand the weight of words. Sometimes, people think they can hide behind a language, but the truth always comes through." Richard studied her for a long moment, his mind racing. He had built his empire through strategic thinking and manipulation, but he realized, now that this was a situation he didn't have a plan for. He didn't know what to say, but he knew he needed to say something. "I wasn't trying to be subtle," he said, his voice betraying a hint of frustration. "It's just business." Elena nodded, her gaze never leaving his. Business doesn't have to come with threats. There are always other ways to get what you want. For the first time in their conversation, Richard felt a twinge of discomfort. He was used to being the one who made the rules, who controlled the game. But here he was, facing a waitress who wasn't afraid to stand up to him. "So what now?" he asked, his voice more measured. Elena remained silent for a moment before speaking. "Now, I finished my shift. But I'm afraid I can't help you with your business." Richard looked at her, his curiosity piqued. "Why not?" he asked. Elena's expression remained neutral. "Because it's not my business. I'm just here to do my job, and I do it well. But I won't be a part of something that goes against what's right." Richard leaned back in his chair, the weight of her words settling in. He had expected her to be intimidated, to apologize, or perhaps even be afraid of the consequences of standing up to him. Instead, she had responded with dignity, with a quiet strength he hadn't anticipated. For a moment, he felt a strange sense of respect for her. Elena turned to walk away, but Richard called out to her. "Wait." She stopped and turned back, her posture calm but alert. "Yes, sir?" she asked, her voice steady. Richard hesitated, not sure what to say. He was a man who had always been in control, but in this moment, he felt something unfamiliar, vulnerability. "I want to thank you," he said, his voice softer than before. "For what?" Elena asked, genuinely curious. "For reminding me that not everything is about power or money. I've lost sight of that." Elena's gaze softened, but she didn't say anything. She simply nodded, acknowledging his words, before walking away. As she moved through the cafe, Richard watched her go. His mind was still reeling, but one thing was clear. This encounter had changed him. He had come into the cafe expecting to dominate the conversation, to make a deal. But instead, he had walked away with a new understanding of power, one that didn't rely on money or manipulation, but on respect and integrity. As Elena disappeared into the kitchen, Richard sat in silence, the weight of the night's events slowly sinking in. He knew that he would never forget this encounter, and that something had shifted within him. This quiet waitress, who had initially seemed insignificant, had done more to teach him about himself than anyone in his world ever had. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he was ready to listen, to learn, and to change. As the door of the cafe swung open again, Richard stood up, leaving a generous tip on the table. He wasn't sure what his next step would be, but he knew he had to make it right. And maybe, just maybe, he could start by changing the way he treated people like Elena. As the days passed, The strange connection between Jack Anderson and Christina Matthews deepened in a way neither of them could have anticipated. It had started as a business proposition, but now, it felt more like a tug of war between their two worlds, neither of which had fully understood the other. Jack, the billionaire CEO, had lived a life of calculated control and strategic moves. His every decision was based on logic, wealth, and power. But Christina was different. She had no interest in his money or his status. She saw him as a man, not a symbol of success. And that was what fascinated him the most. He found himself thinking about her at the strangest times, during meetings, in the middle of conference calls, and even while trying to focus on his company's latest merger. The woman he had once dismissed as just a waitress was now occupying space in his mind that he couldn't shake off. Christina, on the other hand, was struggling with her own feelings. She had never expected this kind of attention. Growing up, she had always kept her head down, blending into the background, living life without seeking any spotlight. But Jack was different. He had a way of looking at her that made her feel like she wasn't invisible, like her thoughts and opinions mattered. It made her nervous and a little afraid. But she couldn't deny the pull. The invitation to work with him had seemed like a dream. The compensation, the promise of a new life, was everything she had ever wanted. But she also knew that it was a dangerous game. What would happen when he found out the truth? The truth about her past? The truth about why she had stopped her career in finance? What would he think if he knew that her ambition had been shattered by betrayal? Her thoughts were interrupted one afternoon when Jack called her unexpectedly. "Christina, I need to see you. There's something I've been thinking about, and I want to get your thoughts on it." His voice was casual, but there was an edge of urgency to it. She had learned to recognize that tone. "Of course, Mr. Anderson," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'll be there in an hour." As she walked into his office, the same overwhelming sense of being out of place hit her like a wave. The sleek glass walls, the polished wooden floors, the panoramic view of the city, it all felt so far removed from her quiet life in Brooklyn. Jack was standing by the window when she entered, looking out at the skyline, his profile sharp and commanding. He turned as she approached, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice smooth. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. You were right. I underestimated you." The words caught her off guard. She had expected him to keep his usual cool, to speak to her as if she were just another consultant. But this felt different. It felt personal. "I don't know about that," she said, her voice cautious. "I just said what I thought." Jack chuckled, shaking his head slightly. "No, you didn't just say what you thought. You made me rethink everything. The way you think about markets, the way you view risk, it's brilliant." He walked toward his desk, gesturing for her to sit down. "That's why I want you to join my team. I don't just need someone who can follow orders. I need someone who can think differently, someone who's not afraid to challenge the status quo." Christina's heart raced. This was everything she had ever wanted, an opportunity to leave her past behind, to prove to herself that she was more than just a waitress. But at the same time, something held her back. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in her chest, the fear that this could all go wrong. "I appreciate the offer, Jack," she said carefully, choosing her words with precision. "But I'm not sure I'm the right person for this job." Jack's expression darkened, a frown tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Why?" he asked, his tone sharper now. "What's holding you back?" She hesitated, her mind spinning. She couldn't lie to him, not anymore. But she also couldn't tell him everything. "It's complicated," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are things in my past that I don't want to bring into the light. I don't think I can work for you, not with everything I've been through." Jack studied her for a long moment, his gaze intense and searching. "I don't care about your past, Christina. I care about what you can do now. If you're willing to take this step, I'm willing to help you leave that behind." His words were sincere, but the weight of her secret pressed down on her. She had worked so hard to build a new life, to distance herself from the person she had once been. How could she risk it all for something that might fall apart? "I don't know if I can trust you," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "Not with this." Jack's face softened, his eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt. "I'm not asking you to trust me with everything. I'm asking you to trust me with what's in front of you. The opportunity to change your life. The opportunity to be more than just a waitress." She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting in her lap. She knew that Jack wasn't asking her to forget her past. He was asking her to move forward, to take a chance on herself. But the fear lingered. The fear that if she took this step, there would be no going back. I need some time, she said finally, her voice small. I need to think about it. Jack nodded, his expression understanding but firm. Take all the time you need, he said quietly. But don't take too long. I'm not going to wait forever. The words stung more than she cared to admit, but they also pushed her to the edge. This was her chance, her only chance. Could she really let it slip away? Jack walked toward the door as she stood, pausing for a moment before he spoke again. Just remember, Christina, he said, his voice low and serious. You're not just a waitress. You're someone with the potential to change everything. And with that, he left her alone with her thoughts, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Christina sat in her small Brooklyn apartment that evening, the soft hum of the city outside barely reaching her ears. She held Jack's business card in her hands, turning it over and over, the weight of the decision pressing down on her like a ton of bricks. She had always believed that hard work and humility were enough to get by, that if she kept her head down, everything would eventually work out. But now, Jack had offered her a chance to break free from the life she had built, a life that had been shaped by sacrifice, by loss, and by fear of failure. Could she take that chance? She glanced over at the small stack of bills on the table, rent due, her mother's medical expenses piling up, and the constant reminder that every day was a struggle to keep things afloat. She had always been the one to carry the weight for everyone else, to put others first. But Jack's offer wasn't just about money. It was about recognition, about a chance to prove herself, about a chance to be seen for the person she truly was, not just the quiet waitress serving drinks and taking orders. But it was more than that, too. It was about the fear of being exposed, of her past catching up to her. She had spent so long hiding the parts of herself that she didn't want anyone to see. What if Jack found out the truth? What if he knew about the mistakes she had made, the choices she had tried so hard to bury? Could she risk everything she had worked for, all the walls she had built around herself, just to take a chance on him? And on herself? Her phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a text from Mia, her roommate. Are you okay? You've been quiet all night. I know you're still thinking about it. Just make sure you don't let this slip away. You deserve better than this life, you know that, right? Christina stared at the message for a long time before typing back. I know, but it's complicated. She placed the phone down, her eyes falling on the window. The city was alive, full of opportunity, but it felt so far removed from her reality. Could she really leave it all behind? She had been here, in this very place, for so long. What if she failed? What if the past caught up to her? Jack's words echoed in her mind. You're not just a waitress. You're someone with the potential to change everything. But did she believe that? Did she believe in herself enough to make that leap? The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds, Christina made her decision. She had spent enough time doubting herself, enough time hiding from the possibility of something more. She grabbed her phone and called Jack. I've thought about it, she said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. I'm in. I'll work for you. But I need one thing, complete privacy. I can't be publicly associated with you or your company. I need to stay out of the spotlight. If you're okay with that, I'll do it. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. She could hear him take a deep breath before responding. I understand. You don't have to explain. I respect your decision, Christina. And I'll make sure your anonymity is protected. Christina smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing. It wasn't just the offer of a job. It was the first time someone had truly understood her. I'll be there tomorrow, she said, her voice confident. Thank you, Jack replied, a note of sincerity in his voice. I won't let you down. As she hung up the phone, Christina felt a surge of determination. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The chance to prove not just to Jack, but to herself, that she was more than just a waitress. She was someone capable of so much more. The next day, Christina arrived at Anderson Capital's headquarters, her heart beating with anticipation. The sleek glass building loomed above her, a symbol of everything she had once thought was out of her reach. But now, as she walked through the glass doors, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She was here to take control of her life, to make a name for herself, and to leave the past behind. Jack greeted her with a smile as she stepped into his office. "Welcome," he said, standing up from behind his desk. "Are you ready to change everything?" Christina nodded, her eyes shining with newfound confidence. "I'm ready." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Christina quickly became an invaluable member of Jack's team. Her unique insights into the market and her ability to think outside the box impressing everyone around her. But it wasn't just her professional abilities that stood out. It was her quiet strength, her ability to stay calm under pressure, and the way she made everyone feel like they mattered. Jack couldn't help but admire her more with each passing day. He had known she was special from the moment he had met her, but now, as he watched her navigate the corporate world with ease, he realized just how much he had underestimated her. It wasn't just her intellect that drew him to her. It was her heart, her authenticity, and the way she made him feel like he could be more than just the CEO of a billion-dollar company. But even as they worked closely together, Christina remained cautious. She couldn't allow herself to get too close to him. She had made that mistake before, trusting someone who ultimately let her down. And Jack, despite his kindness and respect for her, was still a part of that world she had tried so hard to leave behind. One evening, after a long day at the office, Jack and Christina found themselves alone in his office, reviewing some of the latest financial reports. Jack looked up from the papers and met her gaze. "You've been amazing, Christina," he said, his voice low. "I'm not sure I could do this without you." Christina smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I'm just doing my job," she said softly. "You're doing much more than that," Jack replied, his voice tinged with admiration. "You're changing the way I see everything." For a moment, there was a silence between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was filled with unspoken emotions, a connection that neither of them could fully understand yet. But as Jack looked at Christina, something shifted. He realized that he had been drawn to her not just because of her intellect or her work ethic, but because of who she was as a person, someone who had the power to change not just his company, but his life. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that with Christina by his side, anything was possible. Christina sat at her desk in the corner office of Anderson Capital, looking out at the skyline of Manhattan. The city sprawled beneath her, a sea of lights and possibilities, but all she could see was her reflection in the glass. The woman who had come so far, yet was still unsure if she was truly ready for all this. She had never been one to seek attention, never wanted to be at the forefront. But now, she found herself at the heart of a powerful corporation, working alongside Jack Anderson, the man who had given her an opportunity to change her life. And yet, despite all the success she had achieved in such a short time, something inside her felt unsettled. She had spent so long keeping her past hidden, maintaining a tight grip on the pieces of her life that no one else was allowed to see. The moment she'd agreed to work with Jack, she had known she was opening herself up to a world she wasn't sure she belonged in. But now, as the days turned into weeks, she realized she was becoming more and more immersed in that world. And Jack, he had become someone she couldn't ignore. Every time their paths crossed, it felt as if there was an invisible thread pulling them closer together, despite the barriers they had built around themselves. He was smart, driven, and fiercely ambitious, but there was a vulnerability in him she hadn't expected. It wasn't the kind of vulnerability that screamed for attention, but the kind that made him second-guess his decisions, the kind that made him reach out to her for advice when he had always been the one giving orders. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, but she also knew how dangerous it was to get too close. She had spent her entire life running from the ghosts of her past, and now, with Jack in her life, she was terrified of what would happen if those ghosts caught up with her. She sighed, leaning back in her chair. The steady hum of the office seemed distant. As her thoughts swirled, it was almost time for their quarterly meeting, and Jack had asked her to prepare a presentation on emerging markets. It was a huge responsibility, one that would test everything she had learned over the past few weeks. But she was ready. At least, she told herself she was. The door to her office opened, and Jack walked in, his presence as commanding as ever. He flashed her a quick smile before sitting down across from her. "I was just thinking," he began, his voice thoughtful. "This company is changing. We're moving faster than I ever expected." Christina nodded, unsure of where this conversation was going. "That's good, right?" she asked, trying to sound confident. Jack's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, There was a flicker of something. Something more than just business. It is, he replied slowly, but it's also scary. Christina felt a tightness in her chest. What do you mean? Jack leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk, his gaze never leaving hers. I've been pushing this company for so long, trying to make it grow. But now that we're here, I don't know what's next. And I don't know if I can do it alone. The vulnerability in his voice was unexpected. She had seen him as the confident leader, the man who had everything under control. But in that moment, she saw the cracks in his armor. He was just as uncertain as she was. You're not alone, Christina said, her voice softer than she had intended. Jack's gaze softened, and he leaned back in his chair. I know, but sometimes it feels like I'm carrying everything on my own, and I don't know if I can keep doing it. Christina swallowed. She knew that feeling all too well, the weight of responsibility, the fear of failure. It had been her reality for so long. But here, in this moment, with Jack, she realized that they were both struggling with the same fears. They were more alike than she had ever thought possible. You don't have to do it alone, she said again, this time with more conviction. We're a team, and if you need help, you can ask. Jack smiled, and for a moment, it was as if the weight had lifted from his shoulders. I think I needed to hear that, he admitted. Thank you. Christina's heart skipped. A beat. She wasn't sure if it was the relief she saw in his eyes or the way his words made her feel, but something shifted between them in that moment. She wasn't just the quiet waitress anymore. She was someone he trusted, someone he valued, and that meant more to her than she had ever realized. But as the meeting approached, Christina pushed those thoughts aside. She had a job to do, and she had to focus. She wasn't here for anything other than the opportunity to prove herself. She couldn't let herself get distracted, not now, not when everything was finally falling into place. As the presentation began, Christina stood confidently in front of the room, outlining her strategy for the emerging markets. Jack sat in the front row, watching her intently. She could feel his gaze, but she didn't let it throw her off. She was in control now. This was her moment. By the time she finished, the room was silent. She had nailed it. She had answered every question with ease, impressing even the most skeptical members of the team. Jack stood up, clapping his hands together. That was incredible, he said, his voice loud and clear. Christina, you've exceeded all my expectations. The room echoed with applause, and Christina felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had done it. She had earned their respect. But more importantly, she had earned Jack's. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had finally found her place, not just in the company, but in the world. As the meeting ended, Jack walked over to her, a genuine smile on his face. You were amazing, he said. I don't know how I ever doubted you. Christina's heart raced. She couldn't remember the last time someone had believed in her this much. Thank you, she said softly, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. But as their eyes locked, she knew that this was only the beginning. There was still so much to be done. And no matter what happened next, she was ready to face it, with Jack by her side. The following days at Anderson Capital passed in a blur. Christina's confidence had skyrocketed after her successful presentation, and Jack's respect for her grew with every passing moment. But there was a change in the air, an unspoken tension, that neither of them could ignore. Jack continued to lean on Christina's expertise, her strategies bringing him insights he hadn't anticipated. The company was thriving, but as their professional relationship deepened, so did the quiet bond between them. Christina couldn't help but notice how Jack seemed to trust her more with each decision. His confidence in her was something she had never expected, and it made her feel more alive than she had in a long time. But there were moments, fleeting and subtle, when their eyes would meet across the room, and something unspoken passed between them. Those moments left her heart racing, and she couldn't ignore the pull she felt every time their paths crossed. Jack, for his part, seemed to sense it too. He watched her closely, a quiet understanding between them that neither dared to voice. They were both playing a delicate game, balancing the professional and the personal, afraid of what might happen if they let their guard down. It was late one evening when the tension finally broke. The office was almost empty, save for Christina and Jack, who were reviewing some final numbers for the company's quarterly report. Christina had just finished going over the last set of figures when Jack stood from his desk, walking toward her. You've done an incredible job, Christina, he said, his voice low, his usual confident tone softened by something else. She looked up from the papers, surprised by the sincerity in his words. "I'm just doing my part," she replied with a small smile, trying to keep things light. Jack paused for a moment, his eyes scanning her face. "No, you're doing more than that," he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "You've changed the way I see things. You've changed the way I do things." There was a weight to his words that made Christina's breath catch. She had always kept her distance, always hidden behind her work, but in that moment, she felt something shift. Jack's gaze never wavered, his eyes intense, as if searching for something in her expression. Christina felt a wave of vulnerability wash over her, something she had never allowed herself to feel. She had spent so long building walls around herself, afraid of what might happen if she let someone in. But now, with Jack standing before her, those walls seemed to crumble. She didn't know what it was. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, or the way his words made her feel seen. But for the first time, she felt like she mattered, not just as a professional, but as a person. "Jack," she began, her voice soft, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "I don't know if I can." Before she could finish, Jack took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "You don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I just want you to know that I see you. I've always seen you." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Christina's heart was pounding in her chest, and she could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. She had always been careful, always kept her emotions in check. But in this moment, with Jack standing so close, it felt impossible to hide what she was feeling. She started again, but her voice faltered. Jack reached out, his hand brushing against hers, and the touch sent a shock through her. It was gentle, tentative, but it held so much unspoken emotion. "You don't have to explain," Jack said softly, his thumb brushing over the back of her hand. "I know." And then, without another word, he leaned in, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was tender and full of unspoken promises. It was a kiss that spoke of everything they had been holding back, of the desire, the longing, and the connection they had both tried so hard to ignore. Christina's heart raced as she responded, her arms moving to wrap around his neck, pulling him closer. In that moment, everything else faded away. There was no more fear, no more hesitation, just the two of them, together. When they finally pulled away, both of them were breathless, their foreheads resting against each other. "I've wanted this for so long," Jack whispered, his voice husky. "I've wanted you." Christina closed her eyes, her heart still racing. She had never allowed herself to want anything like this, not after everything she had been through. But with Jack, it felt different. It felt real. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted quietly, her voice full of uncertainty. Jack pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "You don't have to be," he said softly. "I'm here, whenever you're ready." The tenderness in his voice melted the last of her doubts, and for the first time, Christina allowed herself to lean into the moment, to feel the warmth of Jack's presence. "I'm ready," she whispered, the words feeling like a promise, a vow to herself as much as to him. Jack smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "Then let's take this one step at a time," he said, his voice full of reassurance. And with that, they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The future, once so uncertain, now seemed full of possibilities. Christina had come so far, but with Jack by her side, she knew she could face anything. They had both been given a second chance, one that was full of hope, and the promise of a future neither of them had dared to imagine. The world outside the office continued to spin, but in that moment, it felt like everything had come to a halt. Together, they had found something more than just success. They had found each other. The days that followed felt like a blur of possibilities for Christina. She and Jack had taken that first step, and now, everything seemed to be falling into place. The air between them had shifted, and the once unspoken connection was now palpable. Their work together continued to thrive, but there was a new energy between them. Jack's trust in her had grown exponentially, and in return, she found herself leaning on him more, opening up in ways she had never allowed herself to before. As they spent more time together, both in and out of the office, their relationship deepened, and with it came the undeniable truth: what they had was real. But, despite the comfort and warmth Jack brought into her life, Christina couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she hadn't fully dealt with. Her past. It had always been there, lurking in the background, ready to pull her back whenever she let her guard down. She had worked so hard to distance herself from the woman she used to be, but now, with Jack by her side, she couldn't ignore the fear that came with truly opening up to him. She had never told him the full story, about the betrayal, the sacrifices, the part of her past that still haunted her. And she wasn't sure if she could. It was early one morning, when Jack approached her with a new project, one that could push the company to even greater heights. He had been incredibly excited about it, and Christina could see that he trusted her judgment more than ever. But as they sat together, discussing the details of the project, she realized that the weight of her secret was becoming harder to carry. She had to tell him. The thought of keeping it from him any longer seemed impossible. But how could she? How could she possibly explain the parts of her life she had buried so deeply? As the day wore on, the pressure built, until it felt like she couldn't breathe. When the office had cleared out and the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the city, Christina found herself standing in front of Jack's office door. She knocked softly, her heart racing as she waited for his response. "Come in," Jack's voice called from inside. Taking a deep breath, Christina pushed open the door. Jack was sitting at his desk, papers spread out before him, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Hey," he said with a smile, standing up. "I thought you'd already left for the day. What's up?" Christina swallowed, her hands trembling slightly. She had no idea how to start this conversation, but there was no going back now. "Jack, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice quiet but firm. He furrowed his brow, sensing the shift in her tone. "Of course. What's on your mind?" She took a step closer to him, her gaze steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "There's something about my past that you don't know. Something that I've kept hidden for a long time." Jack's expression softened, and he walked around his desk, placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of reassurance. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready for," he said gently. "But you're safe with me, Christina. You don't have to hide from me." The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. "I've never really talked about this before," she continued, her voice shaking slightly. "But I think it's time you knew the truth. I wasn't always the person I am now." Jack nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Take your time," he said, his voice calm and patient. "I'm listening." Christina took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I grew up in a different world, Jack. I had a life I thought I could have for myself. One where I could build something meaningful. But things went wrong. People I trusted betrayed me. I lost everything, and I had to start over. That's when I came to New York, took up work as a waitress. I kept my head down and tried to move on from everything that happened." Jack's gaze softened as he listened, the weight of her words sinking in. He stepped closer to her, his hand still resting on her shoulder. "Christina, you don't have to carry that on your own anymore. Whatever happened, whatever you've been through, it doesn't define you. You are here now, and that's what matters. You've built something incredible." She nodded, the tears she had been holding back threatening to spill over. "I know, but sometimes, the past doesn't let you go. And I don't want that to affect what we have. I don't want to bring it into this." Jack gently lifted her chin, making her look at him. "You're not your past. And neither am I. We both have stories, and we don't have to carry them alone. I want you to know that you don't have to hide from me. Whatever you've been through, whatever you're still going through, I'm here for you." His words were like a balm to her soul, and for the first time, Christina felt the walls she had built around herself begin to crumble. She had been so afraid to let anyone in, so afraid to be vulnerable. But in that moment, with Jack by her side, she knew that maybe it was okay to be open, to be real. She could finally breathe, and for the first time, she allowed herself to truly feel what she had been denying for so long. As Jack wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a gentle embrace, she whispered the words she had never said aloud before. "Thank you, Jack, for seeing me." And for the first time in a long time, Christina felt seen, not just as a waitress, but as a woman with a past, a present, and a future that was hers to create. Together, they would face whatever came next, side by side. The next few weeks brought a sense of calm and stability into Christina's life, something she had not felt in years. Working closely with Jack, their relationship had grown even stronger, both professionally and personally. They had learned to navigate the delicate balance between their roles as colleagues and the deeper connection that had formed between them. Despite her earlier fears, Christina found herself letting go of the walls she had built around her heart. Jack's unwavering support and understanding had opened doors she never thought possible. But with every passing day, as her trust in him deepened, so did the underlying tension she had been trying to ignore, the fear of what might happen if the world outside their shared bubble found out. Their bond, though real and undeniable, was still a secret in many ways. No one at the office knew the full extent of their relationship, and Christina was unsure if she was ready for that to change. The idea of her past becoming a part of their present still terrified her. What would happen if Jack's world collided with hers in a way she couldn't control? Would it change the way he saw her? Would it push them apart? She had told him her truth, but the weight of the unspoken things she had yet to reveal still lingered in the back of her mind. One evening, as Christina was preparing to leave for the day, Jack stopped her. His office door was open, and she noticed he was sitting at his desk, staring at a stack of papers in front of him. He didn't seem to notice her standing there for a moment, but when he finally looked up, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. "Christina," Jack said, his voice soft but urgent. "I've been thinking about something." She walked into the room, her heart racing slightly. "What's on your mind?" "I don't know if it's the right time, but I can't stop thinking about it," Jack said, pushing the papers aside. "I want you to know how much I value you, your work, your insight, and you." His words made her heart skip. She hadn't expected this. "Jack, you don't have to," she started, but he cut her off. "No, I do. I know we've been working together for months, but this is more than just work for me now." There was a pause, and Christina could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "I think I'm falling for you," he said, his voice quiet but full of sincerity. The words hit Christina like a wave, and for a moment, she was speechless. She had known that their relationship had deepened over time, but to hear him say it out loud was both unexpected and overwhelming. Jack stood up from his desk and walked toward her. "I know this is complicated," he said, his voice full of caution, "but I wanted to be honest with you. You've changed my life in ways I never expected." Christina felt a lump form in her throat as she struggled to process his words. She had wanted to hear him say this, but now that he had, she wasn't sure what to do with it. "Jack, she paused, her mind racing. "I care about you, more than I thought I could." The relief that flooded through her was almost overwhelming, but she couldn't let go of her fears. But what happens if this gets out? What if it changes everything? Jack reached out, taking her hands in his. "Christina, I don't care what happens outside of this room. I just want to be with you. We'll figure out the rest together. I'm not letting you go." His words were like a balm to her soul, soothing the fears that had been gnawing at her for so long. She had spent so many years protecting herself, holding back, afraid of the hurt she had experienced in the past. But with Jack, it felt different. He wasn't asking her to be perfect. He was asking her to be real, to be herself. And for the first time, she felt like she could. They stood there for a moment, just holding each other's gaze, the weight of the world outside momentarily forgotten. But Christina knew they couldn't stay in this moment forever. The world would catch up with them eventually. And when it did, she wasn't sure if she was ready to face it. "I want to believe you," she whispered, her voice full of uncertainty. "But I don't know how to trust that it won't change everything." Jack gave her a soft smile, his thumb gently brushing over her knuckles. "I know you've been hurt before, Christina, but I'm not going anywhere. I promise you that." Her heart swelled with the tenderness in his words, but there was still that small part of her that held back, afraid of being disappointed, of being hurt again. "We'll take it slow," she said quietly, her voice steady now. "One step at a time." Jack nodded, his expression softening. "That's all I'm asking for." He kissed her forehead gently, his arms wrapping around her in a protective embrace. "We'll get through this, together." And for the first time in a long time, Christina believed him. There was still a long road ahead, and she didn't know what the future would hold. But in that moment, with Jack holding her close, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone anymore. The fears that had once held her captive didn't seem so big now. Together, they could face whatever came next. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change for both Christina and Jack. They had crossed a threshold, one that had once seemed insurmountable. The fragile, tentative steps they had taken toward each other had become more confident, more real. Their relationship had shifted into something deeper, more intimate, but with that came new challenges. The office had become a different place, no longer just a space for work, but a constant reminder of the balance they had to maintain. The fine line between professionalism and personal feelings was something they both tiptoed around, unsure of where it would lead. They had shared moments of joy, tenderness, and quiet understanding, but they also knew the world outside their office could change everything. The company was thriving, but every day felt like a delicate dance, especially with their colleagues. They hadn't told anyone yet, and part of Christina felt that weight constantly pressing on her shoulders. It wasn't just the fear of someone finding out. It was the fear of losing what they had. She had learned long ago that the people she trusted could betray her in an instant. She had seen it before. Her thoughts were interrupted one afternoon when Jack called her into his office. She had just finished a meeting with the finance team, and she had barely set her things down when his voice came through the phone. "Christina, could you come in for a moment?" he asked, his tone more serious than usual. She stood, smoothing her blouse, and walked down the hall to his office, her mind racing. As she stepped inside, Jack looked up from a set of papers he had been reviewing. "We need to talk," he said, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. "About the project or something else?" she asked, trying to gauge his mood. "Something else," he replied, his voice calm but tinged with concern. Christina sat down across from him, her hands folding in her lap. Jack leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her. "I've been thinking," he began, "about how we've been handling things. Our relationship, our work, everything. I think it's time we start being more transparent." Christina felt her heart race. She knew this conversation was coming, but hearing him say it out loud still made her stomach drop. "Transparent?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "With the company?" Jack nodded, his expression softening. "With the company, yes, but also with everyone around us. We can't keep hiding this forever, Christina." She swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling on her. She had known it was only a matter of time before the truth came out, but she hadn't realized how much fear had been building inside her. "I'm not ready for that," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can handle the scrutiny. What if it changes everything?" Jack's gaze softened, and he stood from his desk, walking around to her side. "I understand how you feel," he said gently, his hand resting on her shoulder. "But we're stronger than that. We can handle whatever comes our way. Together." Christina closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. She had trusted him more than she had ever trusted anyone, but the idea of opening up to the world, of letting everyone see what they had, scared her more than she wanted to admit. "I've been running from this for so long," she whispered, her voice filled with vulnerability. "I'm not sure I can face it. I'm afraid of what might happen if it all falls apart." Jack crouched in front of her, taking her hands in his. "It won't fall apart," he said softly. "I won't let it. We've built something strong, Christina, and we're not going to let fear dictate our future." She met his eyes, and for the first time, she saw the full weight of his sincerity. There was no doubt in him, no hesitation. "I want to be with you," he continued. "I don't care what anyone else thinks. But I need you to trust me, just like I trust you." Christina felt the tears sting at the corners of her eyes. She had never allowed herself to trust anyone fully, but Jack was different. He had always been different. "I do trust you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm just scared." Jack smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I know, but we don't have to do this alone. We'll figure it out, one step at a time." Christina nodded, her heart swelling with the understanding that, maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. The fear didn't go away, but in that moment, she knew that she had something worth fighting for. She wasn't running anymore. Together, they would face whatever challenges came next. That evening, after work, they sat together in the quiet of Jack's apartment, a glass of wine in hand as they talked through their options. They both knew that the decision they were making wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. "We can't keep hiding," Jack said quietly. "Not from our team, not from anyone. But we can control how we share this. We'll do it on our terms." Christina took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "You're right. It's time." Jack reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a comforting gesture. "We're in this together, Christina. No matter what happens, And for the first time in a long time, Christina allowed herself to believe it. They were stronger than the fear, stronger than the uncertainty. Together, they would face the world, whatever it threw their way. The next few days were a whirlwind. Jack and Christina had decided to be open with the company about their relationship, but the decision didn't come without its challenges. They knew the moment they shared the truth, things would change, and not just between them, but with everyone around them. The air in the office was different, the tension palpable as whispers started to circulate. They had braced themselves for the inevitable rumors, but what they didn't expect was the outpouring of support from some unexpected places. As much as there were a few raised eyebrows, many of their colleagues expressed nothing but respect for the honesty and integrity they had shown. It wasn't easy, though. There were moments when Christina could see the judgment in the eyes of others. She had known the world of high finance before, but this was different. Jack had always been the untouchable CEO, the man with the power, and now, here they were, navigating this new reality together. But what kept them going was their belief in each other and the bond they had built. Jack had never been one to back down from a challenge, and Christina had learned that her own strength was something she didn't have to hide. They had faced much worse together. As the days wore on, Jack grew increasingly supportive of Christina. He made it clear, to her and to the rest of the company, that her contributions were invaluable. And Christina, for the first time in her life, felt like she wasn't just a cog in a machine. She was a leader in her own right. She was no longer the quiet waitress in the background. She was someone whose opinions mattered, whose insights were changing the game. But with all of this new success came new pressure. As the company expanded, Jack started taking on more responsibilities, which meant he was spending less time with Christina. She had seen the stress building in him, the sleepless nights, the never-ending meetings. The same drive that had made him so successful was now starting to take a toll. Christina noticed the change in him, the moments when he would seem distracted, the way his eyes would lose their spark. It wasn't just the work. She knew it was more than that. Jack's world was demanding more and more of him, and she feared it might be too much for him to bear alone. One evening, after another long day at the office, Christina decided to confront him. As they sat down for dinner in his apartment, she couldn't help but notice the weariness in his eyes. "Jack," she said softly, reaching across the table to take his hand. "You've been pushing yourself too hard. I can see it. You're not okay." Jack looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice didn't match the words. "It's just a busy time. The company is growing, and I'm trying to keep up." Christina shook her head. "This isn't just about work. It's about you. I've seen you change. You're stressed, and it's affecting everything. You're pulling away." Jack looked away, the guilt in his eyes clear. "I don't want to be a burden to you," he said quietly. "You've already done so much for me. I'm trying to keep everything together, and I don't want to drag you into all of it." Christina reached out and touched his cheek, turning his face back toward hers. "Jack, you're not a burden. You're not alone in this. We're in this together. You don't have to carry everything on your own." For a moment, Jack was silent. His gaze softened as he stared at her, and Christina could see the weight of everything he had been carrying. Slowly, he reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "I don't know what I would do without you," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I've spent so much time building this empire, but I forgot what really mattered. And now that I've found you, I'm afraid I'll lose it all." Christina squeezed his hand, her heart aching for him. "You won't lose me, Jack. You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. Let me help you." Jack's eyes met hers, the uncertainty fading from his expression. "You've already helped me more than you know," he said softly. "But I don't want to drag you into this mess. I don't want to be the one who holds you back." Christina smiled, a small, reassuring smile. "Jack, I'm here because I want to be. I'm not going anywhere. We're a team. And if we're going to face this, we do it together." He nodded, a look of quiet relief settling over him. "Together," he repeated. And in that moment, Christina knew that despite all the challenges ahead, they would face them side by side. There was no more hiding, no more running. They had each other, and that was enough. As the evening passed, the weight of their conversation lingered, but it didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like a new beginning, a chance for both of them to grow, to take on the world together. As Jack wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, Christina knew that whatever came next, they would be ready. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it didn't matter. They were stronger than the challenges they faced, and together, they would overcome anything that came their way. Months passed, and the rhythm of Christina and Jack's life began to settle into a new normal. The company continued to thrive, but it wasn't just business that was thriving. It was their relationship, too. They had faced the challenges, the doubts, and the fears that came with being open about their feelings, and now, they were stronger for it. They had learned to trust not just each other, but themselves, and in doing so, they had built something more solid than either of them had expected. They had built a life. Jack's world was still as demanding as ever, but Christina had become his anchor, the one person he could count on to bring him back to reality when the pressure started to overwhelm him. And for Christina, Jack had become more than just a colleague or a partner in business. He had become her greatest supporter, the one person who believed in her when she struggled to believe in herself. One afternoon, as they were wrapping up a meeting with the team, Jack looked at Christina with a thoughtful expression. He had something on his mind, something he had been considering for a while now. "Christina," he said, his voice steady, "I've been thinking. It's time we take the next step, not just with the company, but with us." Christina looked up, her heart beating a little faster. She had always known this moment would come, but now that it was here, she couldn't help the flutter of nerves that settled in her stomach. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft, curious. Jack stood up from his chair and walked around the table, coming to stand beside her. "I've spent so much time focused on the future, on building this empire. But I've realized that the most important thing in my life isn't the company. It's you." He paused, his hand resting on the back of her chair. "I want to build a future with you, not just a career. I want to make sure we're both on the same page, that we're both committed to what we've started together." Christina's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about something far more personal, far more permanent. She had always known that. Jack was different, that he saw her as more than just a colleague or a partner. But to hear him say it so plainly, with such honesty and sincerity, took her breath away. "Jack," she started, but the words caught in her throat. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" He smiled, his eyes warm with affection. "Yes," he said simply. "I want to marry you, Christina. I want to build a life with you, and I want to do it right. No more secrets. No more running." Christina's heart swelled in her chest. She had never imagined that this would be her life, that she would be standing here, in this moment, with this man, ready to take a leap of faith. But now that the offer was on the table, she realized that it wasn't a leap at all. It was a step forward into the life she had always wanted, the life she had built with Jack. "Yes," she whispered, a smile breaking across her face. "Yes, I want that too. I want you." Jack's eyes lit up, and before she could say another word, he pulled her into a warm embrace. "I'm so glad," he whispered into her hair. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." In that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. The future that had once seemed uncertain and filled with fear was now full of possibility. Together, they could take on anything. They had faced their pasts, their fears, and now, they were looking ahead to a future they had created together. They knew there would be challenges, there always were. But they also knew that together, they could face them. They didn't have to be perfect, they just had to be there for each other. As they stood together in Jack's office, holding each other, the world outside felt distant, insignificant. There was no more fear, no more uncertainty. There was only the two of them, ready to take on the world, side by side. The next few months were filled with excitement and planning. They knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but they had each other. As they began to make plans for their future together, Christina felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. She had found something she had never thought possible, a partner, a future, and a love that had grown stronger than anything she had ever imagined. Jack had become more than just the CEO of a successful company. He had become her home, her safe place in a world that often felt chaotic. And as they moved forward, hand in hand, Christina knew that they would face whatever came next together, as equals, as partners, as two people who had finally found the courage to love without reservation. In the end, it wasn't the success of the company that mattered the most. It wasn't the millions of dollars, or the deals they closed, or the expansion of their empire. What mattered most was the life they had built together, the love they had nurtured, and the trust they had forged. With each other by their side, they knew they could face anything. The future was theirs to create, and together, they would make it everything they had dreamed of and more. Experience touching stories that will leave you captivated as they explore the lives of individuals who have faced incredible challenges and overcame them with resilience. These touching stories follow the journey of two people, a waitress and a CEO, who form an unexpected bond that grows into a deep connection. As their relationship develops, their personal and professional worlds collide, revealing their true selves. From moments of doubt to moments of pure joy, the touching stories unfold with moments of vulnerability, love, and strength. Join them as they navigate the complexities of trust, love, and success, proving that no matter the obstacles, touching stories can inspire change. In these touching stories, you'll witness the transformative power of love, resilience, and the unspoken bonds that can change a person's life forever. These are not just stories of romance and success, but powerful reminders of the strength found in human connection. If you love heartwarming and inspiring tales, these touching stories will surely stay with you long after you've heard them. With each twist and turn, the touching stories of two unlikely partners reveal that sometimes the greatest success comes not from wealth or status, but from the love and support shared between two people. Dive into these touching stories and let them remind you that no matter the hurdles, love and partnership can make the journey worthwhile.